Welcome to the show Gold Squadron Gays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars loving gays talk about and review their favorite Star Wars content while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
I'm your other host, Charles Rogers, and I'm drinking coffee out of a straw.
Oh, okay, because of your Invisalign or something.
Because of my Invisalign. Yes.
Okay, I was like,
I don't know if you've noticed, but I have the coffee with me, and because I don't want to stain the aligners in the front, so I now have to drink my coffee. I have to make my coffee or get it iced, and I really don't like getting it iced. So I have to make my coffee because we have a whole bunch of the pods in my apartment. Then wait for it to cool. Then drink it out of a straw. It's a little frustrating.
Okay.
But if you hear random sipping sounds on this recording, that's me having to drink out of a straw, and Bradley wasn't able to edit it out.
I love that.
Before we get into the actual content of today's episode, because we're starting something new, we have a new review, Bradley. And actually, this review is over a month and a half old because I didn't notice it until now.
Okay, well, go ahead, read it.
And I want to seriously apologize to Arya the Goat.
Oh.
Great name. I did a couple of years ago rewatch all of Game of Thrones, and Arya is the goat in that show.
Sure.
For taking this long to read out the review. But Arya the Goat writes, Dope show. Actually, the title is Detailed and Thorough. Dope show. The hosts balance detailed and research analysis without the whole know-it-all aura that can sometimes go down in these types of pods. Starting with The Acolyte and looking forward to listening to their breakdowns of more Star Wars as I go.
There you go.
Thank you, Arya. It is Bradley that stops me from doing that. He keeps me humble.
I was going to say, I mean, it could very easily go that way.
It could very
if we
easily.
to.
Guys, people ask me a decent amount of the time, like, hey, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. Like,
Right.
What's advice that you have? Which is absolutely insane to me that we've been doing this long enough that people come to me to ask for advice. But the number one piece of advice I tell them is don't do it yourself. Get a podcasting partner who will not only help you on the production side of things, but also get somebody that you can bounce off of really well and can compensate for your worst excesses. So one of mine is that I tend to over-explain things. And Bradley's gotten really good at this point at sweeping in and being like, yeah, you talk too fucking much. We need to move on.
Well, just because it's easy to tangent, especially with Star Wars. It's very easy to be
especially with Star Wars. And me, because unfortunately I do have so much of this like lore stuff in my brain. I always want to be like, we're going to go on a 30-minute rant about Knights of the Old Republic. And Bradley's sitting here like, this is an episode about Skeleton Crew, Charles. You need to shut the fuck up. And then I'm going to cut all that out later anyway.
I like how you're saying that now, but like I feel like you're gonna have to end up talking about it at some point.
I'm gonna end up bringing up Knights of the Old Republic eventually somewhere in here.
It's gonna go like in the recording. It's gonna go. Yeah, we talk about Knights of the Old Republic too much. This week we're talking about Skeleton Crew.
Okay, what are we talking about this week, Bradley?
This week we're talking about Skeleton Crew, episode 1, titled This Could Be a Real Adventure, where the kids from an ordinary planet discover a surprising secret. Charles, what's one thing you liked about this episode and one thing you did not?
I am aping from our friends at Dark Side Divas a little bit with this. I have borrowed some of their terminology again because it's just too perfect. They have a counter on their show. They do counters. That's one of their things. They have a counter on their show called the Reith Silas Personally Attacks Me Personally counter. And I kind of borrowed that for my notes on this episode. I have the Wim Personally Attacks Me Personally counter.
Okay.
Because the amount of times I watched this episode, like the amount of times while watching this episode for the first time, and every time since, that Wim has done something in this episode that attacks me at his age personally is insane. It is absolutely insane how many times in this episode Wim did something and I'm like, oh my God, that is just like me. So anyway, that was the thing that I liked. Whoever wrote that, like, really understood what it was like to be a latchkey kid who was a bad student only because they were consistently getting more wrapped up in their nerd stuff than they were actually paying attention to school. That hit me on a lot of deep personal levels. One thing I didn't like about this, I'm going to struggle so hard, Bradley, to find things I disliked about these episodes because spoilers for the entire show. I think this is the best piece of Star Wars content, or the best crafted piece of Star Wars content since The Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, wow.
I think full stop, they have never done something that is as well crafted as this before. Not necessarily the best, but I
But you
do
mean like
think
full crap. I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in the details, in the craftsmanship, everything from the direction to the writing to the score to how it all shook out, like the costumes, the music, the acting, like I haven't seen something so tightly managed and perfectly balanced probably since Empire. Like everything, nothing else I think has reached this level since. Now, there are some things that they've done that I think have been better, but this is immaculately crafted piece of like filmmaking. Like it's beautiful. If I had to pick one thing, I think that they could have stood to introduce KB a little bit better. All of the kids get really solid introductions to their personalities up to this point, but KB, I think, lacked a little bit of that. I wish that it hadn't taken us until episode 2 or 3 to find out about her medical issues. I wish they had been brought up a little earlier on. I liked her scenes with Fern where she was kind of like Fern's minion. Like Fern was leading the charge and KB was sort of following behind. I think that could have stood to be a little bit clearer. I think her parents might be the only parents we don't see in this episode. Because we
Yes, I
meet
agree. I don't think so.
Wim's dad, whose name I didn't write down. Undersecretary Farah. We see Neil's parents, whose names I also didn't write down very briefly, but I don't think we see KB's parents at all. So I think KB could have stood to have a little stronger introduction. But I'm going to nitpick. I'm going to nitpick the hell out
No,
of
for
this.
sure. I mean, you
Like
have
it's
to.
going to
But
be a
yeah.
hell of a nitpick. Bradley, what was one thing you liked and one thing you didn't?
One thing I liked, I think it was just the fact that every time like it went to like a new scene or something like that, I always felt myself like giggling or like almost like kicking my feet. Like I was like, there's always something so funny that they were doing in the episode where like Wim and Neil fighting with their fake lightsabers or whatever. Like that is so to me, it is so hilarious and cute. Like it's just they just did so many things, little things throughout the episode that just made me giggle. Like there's just like little things like that. So that's what I just really enjoyed. I felt like just this is just such a fucking solid. I don't want to call it a pilot, but I mean essentially it is a pilot, and because it's the first episode. But like if this was just a standalone, even if we didn't get the second episode with it, like this would have been such a good like by itself. Like that's all you need. I'm glad we did get the second episode when it came out, but I think this stands on its own. Like, it doesn't need any other thing. It doesn't need any other explanation, nothing. It's such a solid story from the beginning to the end. So I really appreciate that. The only thing I didn't really like, and like I said, this is like a nitpick thing, is Vane. I only know this in hindsight, obviously, because we've seen the whole entire season, but he doesn't have a purpose or reason to be here other than he's a pirate. I'm very curious what the rationale was to have him in Mandalorian, have his crew or whatever fuck off and his captain die and all that good stuff, and then just randomly have him be a part of this crew but not actually have an active role or do anything. Because if you think about it, theoretically, like if they were going to bring him from the other show and bring him here, he should have had the Brutus role. He should have been the first mate. He should have been the whatever, because that would have given him purpose and something to do, and then he would have taken over and blah blah blah. I don't know. That's my nitpick, is that like he doesn't have a reason to be here other than pirate, and that bothers me slightly. Also, because he's just a wasted like he's a pre-established character that we have nothing to do with the rest of the season. So I'm just curious why he's here. Yeah, he has like a line or two in the next episode, but like he doesn't really do anything throughout the season. So that's my one nitpick of the thing I didn't like, is why is he here?
I will say, before we jump into the traditional episode, two things. Firstly, can we talk about how nice it is that all of these episodes feel like episodes? Like
Yes.
they have beginning, middles, and ends, and like most of the Star Wars shows, you kind of have to squint to see that. And this one felt. Every other Star Wars show has felt like a serial. This one is still a serial, but it feels more episodic. It feels more like every episode has a clear beginning, middle, and end. They are basically broken down by planet, which I really
Right.
like.
Yeah.
which only really Mando season one
I was
and
gonna say
two, and
Mando
then
season one.
Obi-Wan Kenobi kind of did this to where each episode was
Oh
broken
yeah, I
down.
guess Kenobi did kind of do it. I think
Kenobi
Kenobi
did
felt a
kind
little
of do
too
it.
much more like a serial though than it
That
did.
one was more
Yeah.
obvious to see her, but this one
Yeah.
I love that from a storytelling perspective, yeah, every episode feels complete, which is nice. I do want to say before we hop into our big like coverage, we're gonna do this episode semi-normally, mostly so we don't front load you with actors. Basically, every actor who's gonna be important in the show is gonna show up in this episode or the next episode. Next episode, we're not gonna do the notes so aggressively. And the reason is because we're going to transition to doing some guest episodes, and we want to kind of make those a little bit more casual because we're going to have so many guests. So this is going to be a more traditional look through the first episode. Don't necessarily expect this format the whole way through the show. We're both tired because we just did Acolyte, and we need a more casual mode of conversation. That is to say, I will still have a bunch of trivia. I will still have these things written down.
Right. And we'll
Don't
still have
worry.
pretty lengthy discussion. I think the difference is just going to be like because the vibe of this show is so different. I think like, this show is really like a bunch of friends being together and doing stuff together. Like I feel like that's kind of like what these episodes need to be. It's like just us getting with friends and talking about it and just appreciating it for what it is because I think that's really the vibe that this show gives off. So, it's going to be interesting for sure.
We'll have some fun with it. Bradley, you want to take us into the actual first section because we are going to do this one normally ish.
So I guess we'll start with the opening crawl because they have
They
a
have an
little
opening
opening
crawl.
crawl. So I'm gonna read that for you and
I
then we
have a
can
note
talk about
about
it.
the opening crawl.
Perfect. So it starts off with since the fall of the Empire, the New Republic has maintained order, and yet remote hyperspace routes are increasingly plagued by piracy. And these pirates boldly brand their armored hulls as a sign to all ships surrender or die.
I absolutely fucking love the misdirect in this opening crawl.
Oh, okay. What's
They specifically point out the New Republic. And I love that if you're watching the show, it already primes you to be like, oh, we are in the New Republic era.
right?
So that the deeper we get into the show, we start being like, wait a minute, what the fuck is going on? Because if
Right.
they hadn't set it up front, I would have been like, what era is this in?
That's true because you really don't find out. I mean, I guess like in universe, like you wouldn't find out until I
Episode
guess,
3.
yeah, the third episode because
Yeah,
that's where
when the
like the
X-Wings show
X-Wings
up.
and show up. Yeah. So that's really the only time. I mean, maybe in the second one because they using the credits and they're like, I haven't seen these in a while. Like, but I don't know if that's even really that explicit.
Yeah.
So,
And I also like it's really interesting too with one thing where the show does in terms of its writing is everything is with intention and also it really anticipates what the audience is going to think when they watch it. This show absolutely has passed the boyfriend test with flying colors. If you're new to the show and you don't know what the boyfriend test is, my boyfriend is I wouldn't necessarily call him a Star Wars fan. He's kind of a somebody who is forced to put up with it by virtue of being in a relationship with me. He's seen enough Star Wars. He's seen pretty much all the visual media except for Resistance. And so he kind of has a good, decent working knowledge of how Star Wars works. He does not care to internalize any of this information. So I will say a thing to him if I need to know what the average viewer of Star Wars media is going to think. I say a thing to him, and if his reaction is, huh? Or we're watching a thing and he turns to me and he's like, what was this?
right.
Then something has failed the boyfriend test because somebody who's at least watched all of the visual media didn't pick up on it. Never once in the entirety of this show did he turn to me and be like, what's going on? Or was that from another thing? Never once. This show told you everything you needed to know. It did not bother to throw in a bunch of like random lore information. Spoilers for the rest of the episode, the rest of the season. There's no cameos
Yeah, there's
in this
not really
show.
one.
There's not a single one in the show. Nobody randomly shows up. Mon Mothma doesn't show up, which I was a little disappointed about, but that's because I'm a Mon
Right.
Mothma stand. Hondo never shows up at any point. We don't have a random moment where the Mandalorian swoops in to save the day at the last minute.
Hera doesn't
Like,
give them a call.
Fern
Ahsoka
doesn't give
doesn't
them a
say, "Hey, come
call.
get me." Like,
Yeah,
there's
like
nothing random
when
stuff.
the consular ship shows up at the end of The final episode, we don't have an awkward moment where C-3PO walks out of it. Like none of that's there. You do not have to have watched a single other piece of Star Wars to understand what's going on in this show.
Yeah, you really don't because
You
even
really
with like
don't.
Wim's like little book about the Jedi thing, like you could write that off as like that's just his novel that he reads or like
Yeah.
his little book. Like you don't even have to know what Jedi are
They'll
really. I mean,
they'll tell you
they'll tell
in this
you.
episode what a Jedi is.
Yeah,
It's
so
really abundantly clear what a Jedi is from the way Wim talks about them.
wow. Yeah, now I'm
It's
just
such
realizing
good
this is like
writing.
the most self-contained Star
Hmm.
Wars. I mean, if you
Yep.
think about it. I mean, yes,
Yep.
you do kind of maybe eventually need to know what the New Republic and the Fall of the Empire kind of history of the galaxy, but I don't know if it's that important. Like,
Right. Well, it also harkens back to A New Hope too, with the opening crawl of A New Hope that basically like sets the scene because that's what opening crawls do. Opening
right.
crawls exist in Star Wars media to set the scene so that you don't have to have a whole bunch of exposition in your thing. Like the whole point of A New Hope is it's explaining why the big giant triangle ship is chasing the little bitty ship over the desert planet. And we can get right into the big triangle ship chasing the little bitty ship, and then we can have a firefight, and then we can get right into the adventure. And that's why the opening crawl exists. And this one does a really good job, not only of priming us to be like, there was an empire, it fell, we have a new republic, there we go. Boom. We're right into the story. And I love that. And I also love that it misdirects the audience by really reinforcing, because you have to read the words on the screen, we are in the new republic, because it's so important to understand the difference between the new republic and older iterations of the republic. And we'll talk about them a little bit when we get into episode 2. Anyway, that was all prior to the episode even starting.
I was gonna say that's just the opening crawl.
Yeah, let's just get into what's happening on the screen.
Sure. So in our first scene, we, see a pirate ship that takes over just a random, I guess it's some kind of transporter ship of some
New
kind.
Republic frigate.
Frigate. Okay.
Yeah.
And the pirates, they board and they take over and they're trying to get into a vault. Turns out there's nothing in the vault. And the pirate mutinies their captain because of this. So, yikes.
Hey Bradley, do you want to tell us about some of the actors in this scene?
Sure. Now, I'm prefacing with all the pirates that inevitably show up later in the show are in this scene. However, I'm not going to talk about all the little pirates until later on when they actually have like lines or they're like more involved in the story. So we'll get to all of them, I promise. Just to bring down the actor list on this first episode, I only included the two main ones in this scene. Okay,
Who
just
are
so
the
we're
two main pirates in this scene?
so we're gonna start with the most important, obviously, is Jude Law as Captain Silvo. Even though we don't see his face, it's first of all definitely him.
It's very obviously Jude Law under
Yeah,
that
I don't know
mask.
why.
Yes.
I know why they did it like as a thing in story why we weren't supposed to see his face, but I also kind of was like I could like I knew his voice like even with the modifier on. Like I was like that's obviously
Oh
Jude
yeah.
Law. Like so that was weird.
100%. Well, one thing that the show also does really, really well is that it does the acolyte thing somewhat of setting up a very obvious mystery that we were all rolling our eyes with how simple it is,
Yeah.
and then immediately solving that mystery
Yeah, I guess
to
I
be
mean they just had to do it. I don't know why. It was just part of the bit, but they're committing to the bit.
sure. Tell us about Jude Law.
So Jude Law is best known for lots of movies, but I went through his IMDb and it says best known for The Talented Mr. Ripley, Steven Spielberg's Artificial Intelligence, and romantic comedy that most people know, The Holiday. He does have a Disney trifecta because
Okay.
of course he does. He was Jan Rog in the Captain Marvel movies, which is the villain of the first Captain Marvel movie. And then he was also most recently, he played Captain Hook in Disney's most recent adaptation of Peter Pan called Peter and Wendy.
Oh, you know what? I bet that's why they cast him for this.
I think that's exactly why they
I'll
did,
bet you
because
anything that's why they cast him for
you went
this.
from Captain Hook to Captain Silvo, which is,
We'll
I mean,
fucking get to that
we'll
when we're
get to
done
what
with the
that
actors.
means.
We'll get to
Yeah.
fucking Captain Silvo.
I knew you were going to say something. Okay.
Fucking God.
But
Obviously,
yeah,
I'm going to say something.
so he's our first Disney trifecta of the season, and he is not the last of this scene. uh,
Nice.
Next up, we have now, oh, he's gonna kill me for saying his last name like this. Fred Tatasciore. Tatasciore. It's Italian, so I don't know how to say it, but
I think you got close enough.
Okay, he's the voice of Brutus. There is a actual suit actor for this. I didn't look up his name, but the voice actor for Brutus is Fred. Fred is our, I guess, second. Well, he's our first Disney voice trifecta. He's not our first visual Disney trifecta, but he is a voice Disney trifecta. He has done over 1,000 credits. I'm not gonna list all of them. I barely picked a few. He's done like the Hulk and numerous Marvel projects. He's done voices on Family Guy, Robot Chicken, Invincible, Owl House. I mean, he's so many. He's done Star Wars voices on Rebels and
I've
Resistance, and
got them pulled up, the Star Wars
yeah,
voices that he's done.
I mean, so many things. And if you look at his video games too, I mean, he does so many video games too. Holy crap. He did the Old
Yep.
Republic Star Wars video game, and he does like maybe 50 different voices in that video game alone. So that's wild. So he's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he is an insanely talented. He has been voicing
yeah,
Star Wars stuff since 2005. He was the voice of Qui-Gon Jinn and Appa Rancisis in the original Star Wars Clone Wars microseries. He's in The Force Awakens. He's in Rogue One. He's a couple of different characters in Star Wars Resistance. Yeah, he's Brutus in this. Yeah, he's in 18 billion
yeah.
voices in the Old Republic. I did not have time to cross check who these other voices, all these voices were. Yeah, he's Darth Vader in Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. He's a big additional voices guy,
Right. Yeah. And that's probably why he has over 1,000 credits, because
which
he
is
does do
why
a
he's a
lot of
thousand
additional. Yeah.
credits.
But I mean, very impressive, honestly. And he's definitely one of those guys you see at the convention where like they have the thing behind them of all their characters that they voice, and it's like the whole wall is
Yeah,
covered.
it's completely packed.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about these two names.
Okay. Yeah, let's because they're
Before I
both
talk
very
about how much I love this scene, so Captain Silvo
okay. What is Captain
is
Silvo?
very obviously a reference
Uh-huh.
to Long John Silver, the
Okay.
character from Treasure Island, that partially serves as the basis for this show. And millennials in my generation, like might know it best either from Muppet Treasure Island, in which Long John Silver is played by Tim Curry, or Treasure Planet, that came out around the time Bradley and I were kids. So this name is obviously a reference to Long John Silver, who kind of adopts a similar role in Treasure Island as sort of somebody who ingratiates themselves in with the younger protagonist, but then betrays them at a later time. Although Long John Silver's a little more sympathetic, I think, than Captain Silvo turns out to be.
Yeah, without getting too spoilery for the rest of the season, I doesn't have the same ending, which
Doesn't quite have the same ending.
we theorized it would be the exact same arc, and it definitely was not. So I'm actually
No,
surprised
it
that
diverges.
they tricked us on that one. So that was good.
Brutus, the guy who betrays Captain Silvo, has the same name as Brutus, one of the conspirators that killed Julius Caesar, notably the famous line from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, E tu Brute, and you also Brutus. Yeah, these are some classic fucking Star Wars names.
Honestly, Brutus is like my new fave. Like he is such a king. I love him so much.
He's so hot.
He's
And like
such
I
a cool
didn't think
person.
that it's the voice. It's the voice.
It's the deep,
It's
yeah, like
Fred's voice.
yeah,
The
yeah,
very deep voice
very
coming out
deep
of
voice
this
coming
man.
out of him. Yeah,
Yeah,
very
I'm like,
manly.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I love him. I love him so much.
I might have to get the Black Series, honestly. I wasn't going to, and then I was like, well, shit. Now that I've like watched the show, I was like, he's actually really cool. Like, I just want him. Like,
He's very cool in this opening scene.
oh yeah, no, and he's like, he's got the whole double gun
He's
slinging kind of
double
thing.
gunned,
Yep.
and then he poses.
Ugh,
Like he literally poses with it up for a moment, like looking over at it before he
yeah,
steps aside to let Silvo through.
loves it. He's got such style.
He's got such style. He's got such presence. It's wonderful. It's everything about this opening scene is wonderful. It's like this is classic pirate shit.
This is so cool, by the way. The way they just bam hit you in the face with this scene because like you see the ship that's clearly like destroy not destroy I don't want to say destroyed, but like it's clearly struggling through this like through space, and then all of a sudden the I don't even know what they're called,
The
drills
shadow
or
comes
whatever
over
they are.
first.
Right.
Yeah, the shadow's over first, and then they hit them with the boarding
The
airlock.
boarding airlock things. Yeah. And I was
Yeah.
like, whoa, those are so cool. Like it's so forceful and piratey and just like, I don't know. It's such a great scene.
No, it's like it's also like classic pirate shit too. Like just in the way it's framed and all of the fighting. Like it also like it wants to make it clear from the get-go that this may be a show about kids, but it's gonna go to some places.
I was gonna say the tone shift is very interesting because this scene stands alone throughout the whole episode because the rest of the scenes are like super fun and like very disinfected.
They're very
Like,
low stakes. And
yeah,
this one establishes right from the beginning that the stakes in this show are actually super fucking high.
right. They don't want to. They're trying to like trick you because they're like, wait a minute. We don't want to show you the super desensitized, like really nice town like thing first because that's not where the show's going to end up. So it's like interesting that they had to start with the pirate stuff and then go from that to the Stepford Wives like perfect town, kind of situation.
I also want to talk really quickly about the music in this show
Oh, okay.
because the music, particularly the pirate theme, is incredible. So, the music in this show, the incredible pirate theme that we're listening to in the opening episodes, all the music in the show is written by a guy named Mick Giacchino. And Mick Giacchino has done a couple of composition bits. Namely, he's done The Penguin, the TV miniseries that just came
Oh,
out,
yep.
and a couple of Zootopia things for Disney in the past. He is also the son of Michael Giacchino. Michael Giacchino has written a whole lot more stuff. Notably, he wrote the score to Rogue One. So
Okay.
the music in this show, the incredible pirate like swashbuckling stuff that we're listening to,
Yeah.
written by the Rogue One composer's son.
Wow. Interesting. I love legacy
I love legacy
stuff.
stuff too. This guy's dad also wrote the music to the Batman. He wrote the music to Jurassic World Dominion. He wrote the music to the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie.
That's actually so
Like,
interesting that you said all that. Like, so you just said he did a Star Wars and then his son did a Star Wars. He did Batman and then
he
his
did
son did
Batman and then his
Penguin.
son did the Penguin.
That's so funny. I just love like I love that stuff. Like it's like, oh,
Yeah, that's who's doing the music in this episode.
good for him.
Yes, it is actually really very cool.
So in the next scene, we're introduced to Wim, a young boy who plays with Jedi and Sith action figures, while his father, Wendell, reminds him not to be late for school. And on the way to school, he meets his best friend, Neil, at the bus stop. And they pretend to duel their lightsabers. While riding the bus, Wim notices two girls riding a hoverbike on a sidecar past the tram into a forest.
Let's get a couple of the actors in this opening scene. Bradley, how many do you want to talk about?
Because they don't talk, I'm not going to talk about the girls this scene. We're going to come
Okay.
back to them. So we're just going to do the boys and Wendell, Wim's dad. So starting off
Oh, that's
with,
his name.
yeah.
Okay, I forgot to write it down.
Wendell
I
and
don't think
Wim.
they ever say it in the episode. I don't think they ever vocally identify him as Wendell in the
You know
episode.
what? I don't think they do, but you know what's funny? I just realized it's Wendell and Wim, WW, and then
Yep.
it's Fern and
Farah and
Farah.
Fern.
I just noticed that. Okay. I did,
The
and you know what?
writing
I
of this
don't
show
know the
is so
rest of
fucking
the
clever.
I don't know the rest of the parents, so I can't say what Neil's parents or KB's parents are, but that's very interesting that they're the same letter. I love alliteration.
I
Or
think we
I
will
love when
get
we do that.
Neil's mom's name.
Okay, because I think
We will
her
get Neil's
dad's name
mom's
came out
name.
on like some Topps card or something, but that was it. I don't think we ever got his name in the show. I think somebody just released it later on
Yeah, I think so.
because we never really see the dad, honestly. I mean, he's only in this one
He's
scene, I
he's
think, in the
around.
beginning.
He's
Yeah.
around in a couple of scenes. The mom does most of the talking. Anyway, we got to talk
Anyway,
about who
yeah,
the
sorry.
actors are in this opening
All right,
scene.
let's start with Wim, our kind of hero character. He is played by Ravi Cabot Conyers, best known for voicing the character Antonio Madrigal in Disney's Encanto, and he has also appeared in TV roles on the shows The Resident, Black AF, and Tell Me a Story.
Is he the singing voice for?
I think he does both, as far as I know. I don't
I'm
know.
trying to find. I'm trying to find out if he's the. I think he is
Well, because
the.
Encanto, I think they all just do their own singing
Yeah,
voice.
the
I don't
seven
think,
foot
yeah,
7 foot frame rats along his back.
yeah,
I think this is that guy. This is that kid.
yeah. He's Antonio.
Oh no,
No, he's the little, he's the little,
he's
kid.
the little
The one
kid.
who can talk to
Okay.
animals. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So he
Okay.
doesn't. I don't think he
I
really sings.
completely fucked
Yeah.
that up. Yeah, that guy is that.
There's a
That's a
lot of
different
people in the
character.
family. I understand why
There's a
you're
lot
confused,
of
but yeah.
people in the characters
But
in that
no,
movie.
he's the youngest
He's a
member of the family.
little kid. Okay,
Yeah, because I think he
perfect.
filmed this or he recorded this years ago. So it was like he's already
Oh
young
yeah,
now. So yeah, he was like little when
he
he
was like
first did this.
little when he recorded Encanto. Okay, so
Yeah.
he's the little kid in Encanto. Perfect.
Which also, by the way, just as a little like tidbit of information, pretty much all the kids are only like one step away now from being a Disney trifecta, which is pretty cool.
I think they're all kids who have previously worked for Disney before.
I think so. Yeah, because all of them have a Disney thing for sure. I think maybe Neil doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't have one, but everybody else has a Disney thing. So Neil's the only one who doesn't have a close to a Disney trifecta. But Neil,
Speaking
the
of Neil,
speaking of Neil, is being played by Robert Timothy Smith. His roles include shows such as Good Girls and Mythic Quests, and most recently, he was in the film Dear Santa with Jack Black. And we did kind of talk about this slightly, I think, in episode 0, but there is a couple different ways they make Neil in the show. So Robert does a lot of obviously the voice, but he does half,
right?
I think, of the actual acting. So they have him in like a special suit most of the time where he acts in the scene. And then they have a puppeteer person come redo the scene with a head that isn't as see-through. And then I think they have like a third thing that's just a puppeter, like just like whenever he's like standing still or something. So it just depends on like how they do it. But there's like all this behind the scenes. You can go check it out yourself if you want to. But
I haven't watched it, but I do know that they do have a behind the scenes documentary on
yep.
Disney Plus that you can watch about the making of this show.
Correct. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, please go see it. The Neil aspect of this show is probably the most fascinating
How
of
they
it.
did Neil, because
Yeah,
Neil is like perfect on screen. Like
perfect.
he's so lifelike. He feels so
I believe
real
him.
and part of
Yeah.
the world. And also he's so for having a face that barely moves, he's so expressive.
So like
They've
he's the
captured
magic
so
of
much.
Muppets. Like he's so like yeah, it's
No,
amazing.
it's absolutely insane how well they were able to pull Neil off. Who's playing Wendell?
Wendell is being played by Tunde Adambenpe. He is a musician, singer-songwriter, actor, best known as a founding member and co-lead vocalist of a Brooklyn-based band called TV on the Radio, with whom he's recorded 5 studio albums. And
Wow.
then, yeah, and then as an actor, though, he's appeared in films such as Twisters, Spider-Man: Homecoming, and Marriage Story. So that's 2 connections right there, by the way, if you're unclear. Spider-Man: Homecoming, we'll talk about why that's important later, because that connection has to do with the director and showrunner.
Yep.
And then Marriage Story is interesting because that is Kylo Ren. He was in that
Not
with
just Kylo Ren.
also, who else is in
Vice
that?
Admiral Holdo is also in
Oh, I didn't know
that
that.
movie. Yeah, Laura Dern, who plays the divorce attorney in Marriage Story, is Vice Admiral Holdo,
Oh, I mean, I know
who is
that.
literally
I didn't
behind
know
me.
Laura Dern was in the movie.
Laura Dern's in that movie.
I
It's
never
Laura
saw it,
Dern and
so.
Kylo. It's Laura Dern and Kylo Ren are in that movie.
Adam Driver and Laura Dern. Got it.
Yep.
Okay. Well, there you go. So there's a Star Wars connection there. So I just thought that was interesting. He's also done some voice acting. He was on Adventure Time, and funny enough, he was also in 8 episodes of this show called Laser Wolf, which when I was an intern at Adult Swim, they were making that at the time. So I saw all those episodes like before the show was even released, and no one even knows what Laser Wolf is. But the fact that I know what it is just very interesting because I remember watching it. I thought it was so cool, so trippy. So give that show a
That is an
shot if you haven't.
interesting connection.
Yeah, so all those connections right there. So those are the 3 I guess the men of the show.
I didn't know you interned at Adult Swim, but given it was literally down the fucking street from
uh
one of the buildings we went
yeah,
to school
it's
in,
right. Well,
that makes
actually
sense.
what's funny is I live in a building like a block away from the old Adult Swim building now. And so like I literally like can see it from my apartment, which is so funny because I still talk to my old boss from Adult Swim. So like I'll hit him up on Instagram sometimes and I'll be like, I can see you walking to work or like, and I can't actually, but like he knows I'm joking.
I love your
Like,
rear windowing like your old boss.
yeah, yeah.
I should also bring up while I was giving them shit for their names of
Okay.
Captain Silvo and Brutus the mutinous first mate. His name is Wim because he does things on a whim.
Oh, I fucking love that name, by the way.
Haha, very clever skeleton crew.
So clever. I don't know what Neil means, but I don't think that has anything to do with
I don't
anything.
think
But
that has anything to do with
it's just a
anything.
cute name. I think that's all it is because he's just a cute little kid. But I don't know if that does anything
Means
special.
anything. Yeah, this whole thing, everything about Wim is a ding on the Wim personally attacks me personally counter. Everything from him like bringing his toys to the breakfast table to like having his little toys that he's like whacking together.
Yeah.
To the fact that he's a latchkey kid. Like when I was in middle school, like we actually had, because my mom was like super paranoid about us losing our house key. My brother and I actually had to wear them around our necks as necklaces.
Oh God.
Like she literally tied them on string and was like, put this on your neck so you definitely don't lose it. Because this was back in the day, somewhat before like you had a phone, like cell phones weren't a thing
Right. Right. Right.
necessarily yet when I was in middle school. So you weren't used as a kid to carrying something around in your pocket. And she was like, you're going to lose this. So like we literally had the key around our neck that we would let ourselves in like after school because both of my parents, my mom worked, she wouldn't get home till like 5:30 or 6 o'clock every day. And my dad, because of his job, maybe he would get home at 6. It's hard to know. So no, everything about the early Whim stuff is just like to having friends, specifically gravitating towards the friends who are as big as Star Wars nerds as you are. Because that's the thing about Wim, right? He literally is a Star Wars nerd. In universe, he
In
is a Star
universe.
Wars nerd.
Like actually, is he the first true like in I mean, I guess maybe Ezra a little bit,
No,
but
he is not. I almost said Claudia Black. Claudia Gray's. Look, I've been doing a lot of Dragon Age stuff because that's my other thing that I do, and I have Claudia Black in the brain. Claudia Gray's book, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, features a character who is a Star Wars historian.
oh.
So he is like a history nerd for the Clone Wars. And actually, predating that, there's a more uncomfortable version with the novel Claudia Gray, also Claudia Gray's novel Bloodline, that features a senator who collects imperial propaganda and is kind of pro strong government, pro we need less planetary say and more central government. And there's a wonderful scene where Leia walks into his office and he just has like a stormtrooper helmet, like a scout trooper helmet in the office. And she flips the fuck out. And he's like, I don't see what the problem is. I just collect this old memorabilia. And she's like, I had to fight these people. They
Yeah, that
tortured me. They
yeah.
blew up my home planet. How do you not see that this is a problem? Claudia Gray's stuff is so fucking good. Like, I think Lost Stars is kind of eh, but for the most part, like, all of her stuff is some of my favorite Star Wars novels.
Oh my God, that's actually so funny. It's like people who collect certain
Ye-
World War II memorabilia, and so it's
Yes,
like
it's that. It's literally that, like in universe. It's
I love it.
crazy. Just how good this stuff is. But there've been Wim is the first kind of explicitly written to be like this Star Wars fanboy as a child kind
As
of
a
thing.
child, yeah, I don't think we've ever had like a true. I mean, like my only comparison is slightly Ezra because he's kind of obsessed with it, but he doesn't really. He's
He
not
just
like
mostly collects the stormtrooper helmets.
right. Like, but you're right. I think Wim is the first true like fanboy, like Jedi
Yes.
fanboy. Yeah,
Well, if you don't count the Lego specials, because
which
they
we
write the Lego special protagonists this way because kids are going to be this way. But
sure.
within the canonical visual media, even though the Freemaker Adventures is kind of canon, within the canonical visual media, yes, Wim is the first one, and just continues to attack me, making lightsaber noises with their mouths while
Shoo,
they
shoo.
pretend to fight with them.
No, okay, but so Win has like some kind of fake lightsaber in his hand, but then Neil has nothing. So
Yeah,
he
he's just
actually
doing
is
the
even
hands.
funnier because he's like he like when he swoops it out, he's like shoop because think about it, he's supposed to be playing the evil Sith in this scene because Wim is the Jedi, so he's the Sith, so he's like Palpatine. He goes poof and it like pops out of his robe or whatever. Like,
Well, yeah, it's because he does the hand motion down, doesn't he?
yeah, yeah,
Okay, so if it's been a long time since you were a kid, because the way lightsabers come, when you buy them, like when you're a kid, in order to come in and
yes,
out, they have to actually like
the
they make them in
retractable,
these
yeah.
stages, and you can pull them out or you can push them like back in. You push them on a surface. They have all these warnings on it that's like, be sure not to stab a thing unless the button is depressed to put it back in. But because they're like up in there, the way you have to get them out is you have to like raise it up and like violently pull it down
Yep.
so that it comes out of the,
Oh
or
my
I
God,
guess you
that's
can
so
drop
funny.
it, but that's not as fun.
No.
So like, yeah, I think Neil does that actual fucking motion
Yeah, he definitely
that you do
does.
with the sliding it out.
I
And
fucking
then
love it.
if you're actually doing it, you have to kind of pull it out to make sure it's out. But yeah, the little details in being a Star Wars kid in these episodes is perfect. Is note perfect.
I mean, I have
Oh my
no
fucking
notes for
God.
this scene. I mean, it's so like literally every little aspect of it. Like he even pretends to cut off his arm, and then when he goes to cut his like guts out or whatever, he's like, "Oh no, my guts!" And he's like, "Wait, pause."
I
Like,
got something
like
in
the
my
fact that
eye.
the
Oh
fact
my
that they
God,
have to
it's so
pause the
perfect.
fight, like as
They have
like,
to pause the fight. They have to
oh my
time out
God.
the fight.
It's that, and
Like,
then to top it off, the other kids at the stop are like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
I've had that experience.
so good.
I've literally had that experience
Oh man,
being a kid where the other kids are like, particularly when you get a little older, like Wim is, if you're still like immersed in that
right.
like atmosphere, if you still find that stuff fun, other kids are going to look at you and be like, the fuck are you on about? Like, what? There's another moment, we'll get to it. It's in the next section that extra personally attacks me personally. Hey Bradley, did you know the space suburbs were very controversial?
I did know
And if
that.
you listen to our episode 0, you would also know that. I just have the note, oh no, space suburbs, Star Wars is ruined. But they're
Yeah,
so
oh no.
perfect here. Like even my boyfriend, when he watched the episode, like actually watched them in context, he was like, "Yeah, I mean that makes complete sense why they would be like that. It's a visual cue of
Yeah, like I don't know why people are mad. I mean, especially even
normalcy."
after the explanation, like we even if we didn't know what we know in the final episode, like this is clearly what would society be if there was no war, right? Like that's the kind of
It's the
whole
suburbs.
shorthand of it. Like, yeah, it's supposed to be like it's a perfect in quotations society. So it's because everything's controlled, everything is very like clean, everything is sanitized. People who get mad about stuff like this, they're like, it's not dirty 70s Star Wars. Okay, so
That's
what?
it will get to be that way.
Yeah,
But if you look at the arc of like basic storytelling structure, this is the ordinary world.
right,
Like the inciting incident is Wim finding the hatch in the ravine.
right.
Uh, that argument that's the inciting incident for the whole story.
Yeah, yeah,
Prior to that, we have to establish an ordinary world, and the brilliance of what this has done is it Star Warsed up an ordinary world, not only that we're familiar with, but playing off the kind of 80s movie Goonies sort of genre. Because this was back in the day when you could afford to buy a house.
right.
This was back in the day when you could live in the suburbs and you would have a large swath of people that would all live in the suburbs. A lot of people, this was where you lived. And so, like, a lot of the Goonies and Stand By Me and all of that, that stuff starts like in the suburbs. And so they've Star Warsed it up. It's brilliant.
It's
And then
brilliant.
and then to top it all off, when they're on the bus, they have the Star Tours droid.
I love that, first of all, because it's like, you know what? What else would they be doing but literally driving a bus that is like in the shape of a Star Tours tram, right? Like, isn't it in the same shape?
I think so. I think it's
I
very
think
close to a Star
it's very
Tours
close,
tram.
or it's like the music is the same or whatever. Like it's all visually
It's a
supposed to be
big
like the
old
same.
Star
Yeah.
Tours reference, which
Yeah. I loves that.
ever since they started preloading in one of the new things in the back half of it, it's just not as fun anymore to get mad at. Like when we were jumping from Hoth during the Empire era to like the space battle over Coruscant, that was fun. Now every time I ride it, I always get something from Ahsoka. I'm like, this just
Yeah.
isn't fun
I'm mad that
to
it's a default to
yeah,
Ahsoka
it's
though.
like
Like,
it defaults to one of the new things that they've loaded in
yeah.
to
I
promote the
want
new stuff.
true
And I'm like,
randomization, you
I
know?
want my randomization. Yeah, I want the chance for them to get it canonically correct, and
Well,
then they don't.
I hate to tell you this, but I inevitably see them making a Skeleton Crew add-on at some point for
Inevitably,
this.
inevitably. The pirate fleet
Oh,
from episode 2, we'll get to it.
100%. Yeah. Okay, so in the next section, during an algorithms class, Wim is doodling on his little screen when Undersecretary Farah shows up. She talks to the kids about the career assessment test and determining their future careers based on the planet's contribution to the Republic's great work, whatever that is. And then the Wim, ends up saying, "I want to help people," and everybody laughs at him because that's stupid. We have droids for that.
You want to tell us a little about Undersecretary Farah?
Yes. Undersecretary Farah is being played by Carrie Condon. She is an Irish actress. She was the youngest actress to play Ophelia in the Royal Shakespeare Company's production of Hamlet back in 2001. And
Oh, she
then
would have made such a good Ophelia. Oh
she
my
did.
God, I bet she was so fucking good at that.
And so she did that. She was also, because she is Irish, she was in the film The Banshees of Inisherin, which a couple years ago, I don't know if you remember, that was like the big
I
Oscars
do.
film.
I actually do remember that movie.
And then she's had roles in The Walking Dead and Better Call Saul. And then she does have a Marvel thing. She's been in multiple Marvel movies, actually. You just wouldn't see her face because she is only the voice of artificial intelligence entity Friday in various Marvel films, which is kind of like the little AI that Peter Parker hears on his spider suit. So there you go.
So
Another
I
Spider-Man
work
connection.
another Spider-Man connection. Weird that a lot of these adult actors have
Hmm.
been in Spider-Man.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a
Interesting.
connection there.
Interesting. So Bradley, I work in finance.
Okay.
Not only do I work in finance, typically what I tend to do, all of my side hustles involve some sort of financial aspect to them. I
Sure.
have a screenwriting degree. I don't know how this happened.
Yeah, right.
I didn't even finish my TV production degree. You know, people ask me all the time if I'm going to go back and finish it. No,
No, you don't need to.
no,
It's okay.
I don't need to.
It's okay.
I'm good.
I think you're
Thank
okay.
you. I learned what I needed to learn from those
I was gonna
classes.
say
I do
save your
not need to
money.
pay
I think
them
you're okay.
more money.
Right.
None of these finance words make sense to me. I'm sure I
Oh,
could go
whatever
back
they
and
were
pick
saying.
apart
The
what
droid
the
was
droid
saying,
is
yeah, yeah.
saying.
No
I didn't
idea.
understand it.
I actually, when I was taking notes and like trying to like break down the episode for us, I remember listening to the droid talk and I was like, how the fuck would a normal child be able to understand this? Like even like
That's a
the
big
kids in the
clue.
class, like I'm like, what the fuck?
That's a big clue as to what's going on because you also notice when the kids are going through and naming off what they want to be when they grow up, it's like senior statistical
Yeah,
inspector,
yeah, yeah.
analyst.
I want to be a finance major. Like what? Who cares?
It's
Like
very it's all
yeah,
the kids say finance major and that's weird. And
I
you don't
fucking
you
love it.
don't pick it up the first time because it's
No,
like, "Oh yeah, obviously class is going to be boring." Like everybody's going to be boring to contrast how Wim is this like wants adventure and wants to more importantly wants to
right.
protect people. Like that's his big thing is he wants to protect people if they're in danger. We'll see it time and time again throughout the show. But if you go back and watch it and you're like, "Wait, this is all finance.
Yeah,
Everything
it's
about this is
so
finance."
strange, like algorithms and analysts and all this stuff there. And my favorite part is where the one kid's like, "Hey, I want to be an analyst too." Like, what? Like, uh,
I had this argument with my younger brother at one point when we were kids because we both wanted to be engineers because our grandfather was an engineer. This
ah,
didn't last very long, but both of us kind of went through a phase where it was like we want to be engineers because that's what my grandfather did. I dropped that very quickly. I wanted to be a marine biologist for a hot minute, but I feel like the more gay people I talked to, the more all of us had a marine biologist phase.
fun little quick story. When I
Okay.
was in kindergarten, we made these little toilet paper rolled time capsule things, like those dumb art projects kids do in kindergarten
Yeah.
and stuff. But in there, we had to write down what we wanted to be when we grew up, and then when you graduated senior year of high school, you were supposed to open it or whatever. And my mom apparently had kept it for years. I didn't know this. And then I found it one day, like back when I was in college, I think. So, like, this is a way past the expiration date of when you're supposed to open it. And I opened it, and you'll never guess what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Was it a marine biologist, Bradley?
I wanted to be a dolphin trainer.
That so tracks for you.
And you know what? It makes so much sense because I remember watching the movie Flipper as a kid and being like, that's what I want to do.
That makes sense.
I want a dolphin.
Speaking of the contrast between Wim and the other kids in this scene, there is a moment where Farah comes up behind him and he's like drawing a Jedi
Yes.
on his desk. This was the moment I alluded to that really personally attacks me personally because I got a lot of trouble for drawing in class.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because I was also really big into when I was in fifth grade, Fellowship of the Ring came out.
Uh-oh.
I'm dating myself here. When I was in fifth grade, yeah, it was fifth grade, Fellowship of the Ring came out. And I became obsessed with the Lord of the Rings.
Really, I wouldn't have known that, but okay, sure.
Really? Yeah,
Would have
my
never guessed
Lord
that
of
about
the
you.
Rings Legos in the background. You can't if Bradley's looking at like the visual image of me, but it's not on the screen right now, and I'm not going to adjust my webcam to move it, but I literally have like Helm's Deep and Isengard behind me.
I love
Like,
that.
anyway, I was obsessed with Lord of the Rings, and so my big thing was drawing like either Lord of the Rings characters or like trying to draw the locations. And I got in a lot of trouble throughout middle school for spending so much time drawing. I also got in a lot of trouble for reading Star Wars books in
Weird.
class,
Oh, in like during class.
like during class.
Okay. I was like, you got in trouble for reading?
Yes, I do have to admit on the podcast that I do read books. But yeah, I got in a lot of trouble for like drawing
Yeah,
because
that makes
teachers
sense.
would come up behind you and they'd sneak up on you. So this was a whim personally attacking young me personally. Farah does mention the great work. Since the show has been over, there is an interview that has come out kind of explaining what's going on. If you don't know, in the High Republic Phase 1, the new Chancellor's big initiative is she wants to do what's called her great works, including such things as building Starlight Beacon, having a Republic Fair. She basically wants to like really make this the golden age of the Republic through these great works.
Oh.
And the name The Great Work is meant to call to that kind of. The clarity that the showrunners provided was that it's maybe not necessarily a direct reference to Lena So's great work because it probably predates it. That was my addition, not theirs. But it there must be this idea throughout the Republic of the concept of a great work, of a concept of doing something big and important. So that's actually where that's from.
I do want to talk about the no, I guess we can wait. I was gonna talk about the little girl that Neil has a crush on, but I guess he doesn't really mention it till a little bit later. So I guess
She never turns up after this episode, Bradley.
that's true. I guess and we only visually see her here, so let's talk about her real quick.
Okay, let's really quickly
Real
talk
quick.
about the girl Neil has a crush on.
Because she's so cute.
The
Like
big, her with her big eyes.
they look like
Yeah.
they're like I think they're like a mixture between like a giraffe and like a deer or something because they have like the little like giraffe antenna things on their head, but then like
What really sells it, I think, is the eyes.
is the
The
eyes.
huge expressive eyes. And also like one thing they do really cleverly with the child aliens in this series is they have really big expressive eyes because children connect with eyes. If you like me have watched Young Jedi Adventures, because I'm depressed all the time. And that show is like injecting serotonin directly into my brain. You'll notice that the art style is animated for very young children is that the eyes are very big. And the reason for that is because children connect really well to eyes and to expressive eyes. So all the children in this show, the ones that we predominantly see, Hannah, who's the girl that Neil has a crush on, and then Neil himself, both have these very big eyes and these very expressive faces that help us, the audience, connect with them even though they're alien. And when we see the adult aliens on the pirate gang, they have normal sized eyes and their faces are they're very hidden and kind of alien and twisted. It's very cool how they do the kids in the show so we, the audience, connect with them.
Also, I don't know where else to put this in because you said eyes. I missed this in the first scene, but the one pirate gets shot in the eye and just keeps on going. He's just
I think
like
he will have an eye patch
I think he does get
as the
one later
series
on,
progresses.
but I just
Classic
I
pirates.
meant to bring him up in the first scene because I was like, how does one get shot in the eye like that and just be like, oh fuck it, let's keep going. Like in the next scene, KB and Fern are racing their hover bike through the plaza. After pushing its limits, unfortunately, the hover bike breaks down. In the garage, KB is trying to repair the hover bike, but they need a new, what is it called, carburetor or
Power
something.
converter,
Power
I think they
converter.
said
I
was what
think
it
that's what I
was.
keep forgetting the word. A group of kids arrive and make fun of them for having a kiddie bike that breaks down. Fern is like, nah, we're going to be able to fix this soon so that we can race. I guess there's some kind of race that they're getting ready for. Fern heads home, and inside she's met with her, like, I guess, maintenance or maid droid of some kind. And the droid's like, "Where were you?" And then she's like, "I was in my room studying." And then droid's like, "No, you weren't." And then Fern's like, "Yes, I was. Memory override." And I love how she does that. And then her mom kind of confronts her and is like, "Yo, what's going on with you? You're at the top of your class now." Then we skip back to Wim, and he's studying for his assessment test when his dad tells him to go to bed. He wants a bedtime story, but then Wendell's like, "Nah, you're too old for this." So we'll start with Fern. Fern is being played by Ryan Kira Armstrong. Her first acting role was on 3 seasons of the Netflix Canadian series Anne with an E. She later played the title role in the updated film Firestarter in 2022, and she appeared in the main cast of the first half of this season of American Horror Story. That was like 2 seasons. The first half was called American Horror Story Red Tides. She was one of the main characters in that, and she also featured in films such as It Chapter 2 and Marvel's Black Widow.
She does a lot of horror.
She does.
And I can kind of tell because she's such a good actress.
Yeah, I feel like I was when I was looking at her like list of stuff, I was like, "Oh, I see. That makes sense." You kind of have to be a certain type of actor to be able to do like that kind of genre, and I feel like she's good at that. Like she has a good, very serious tone to her. Like she's very adult even though she's very young. So she's she's
Yes.
really good
She's
at that.
clearly comfortable handling like much more emotional, much more serious moments because
Right.
in the horror scenes, in the scenes in this where the kids are like being menaced, she is genuinely bone chilling to watch. Like the fear and anger and hatred and terror on her face that she can pull off. Yeah, it's phenomenal. Phenomenal actress.
And then KB is being played by Kiriana Crater. I didn't know a lot of her stuff. She's in a lot of short films, but she was featured on the Disney Channel show Bump. So that was like her kind of biggest thing that I saw.
Nice. So, little detail about I got this from the StarWars.com trivia guide. One of the details, that little kid that like bullies them, the older kid,
Yeah.
is named Bonge Falfa.
Okay.
And the character is named in homage to Bob Falfa, Harrison Ford's character in American Graffiti.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. I've never seen American Graffiti, so I wouldn't really know anything about it, but it's that whole Americana driving cars thing.
George
Yeah.
Lucas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep. I do want to say that Fern's mom being super concerned with academic pursuits and not really like knowing what their kid is up to outside of that because they are only really concerned with academic pursuits. That is also a ding on the personally attacking me personally counter as a
There you
kid.
go.
Yeah, her mom coming up and being like, "You need to study hard because that's like the only thing that matters." That was a mentality in my family for a while.
I
That
will say I have to defend her mom here only slightly because in their society, what her mom says is there's only so many places for people at the top. I kind of understand what she's saying because she's saying like,
right,
hey, I have a really good position and there's only like 3 of me, on the whole planet. So if you
right.
want to be as affluent as I am, you really have to be number one in your class all the time. And that's the only way you're going to keep this job because the supervisor is going to be like, hell yeah, you're just like your mom. Like, you can have this job when she's done. Like stuff like that. I get it. In actual practice, that's very toxic, obviously. Like, I
Well,
get it, but
I think that at least for my family, what ended up happening is that was around the point they also figured out that I wasn't going to do anything like my main focus was going to be creative endeavors.
right,
And
right, right.
if they wanted me to be successful, like if they wanted me to be like somebody who was successful and happy, they had to stop pushing me that hard academically because I was never going to be top of the class. I could never focus that much. Like I was clearly way more interested in doing other stuff. And yeah, that's part of the thing too with this planet is like there's no opportunities like that.
Right.
Like
You're
there's
you're
things
only going to be
Fern
an
or Wim
analyst.
could
You're
do.
only
You're
going to
only going to be an
be
analyst. You're only going to be in finance.
Yeah.
It's like I've wound up in finance, sort of by accident. Like it's kind of bizarre how that happened. But if you look at all the things I do outside of it, the things I really care about, like this show or my writing or Legends Expo or any of that, it's all stuff that's tied back to these creative fields.
Well, it does
And
bring up a
those are
really good
opportunities
point.
aren't there.
It brings up a good point. Like, is there even creativeness on this planet? Like,
It
because
seems like no.
yeah, like there's no clubs, there's no bars, there's no like, you know what I mean? Like that doesn't seem to be a thing. Like, I mean, there could be, we just didn't see it, but it doesn't seem like that's important to the society for the great work. So like their only goals in life, it's very like, no, you go to work, you learn, or you that's it. Like you don't do other stuff because we'll find out later, you don't go to the woods, you don't go play around outside. You know what I mean? Like so it's
Right.
very interesting.
And we also see the kids are kind of moving, you know, the kids are kind of moving as a group in the direction of fixating on the finance, and Wim is kind of the outlier. Even Neil is
Right.
sort of like, I'm buying in. Neil is the healthiest one out of all of these people already because he's like, I'm buying into this whole thing, but I still know how to have fun.
Yeah, he is actually the most adjusted because he does like to have fun, but then like you notice like he's very smart. He already knows what he wants to do. He already knows like I'm gonna do this. He has goals to an extent. Like he's very much like I know what I like and I know what I want. He even has
Exactly.
a prospective girlfriend that he's like, hey, we just haven't talked yet. Like I know I like her. Like she's gonna be the one for me. I just haven't talked to her yet. I just find that really funny. I do want to
It-
bring up too,
yeah,
this is the moment where I felt like we could have gotten an extra KB scene
I agree.
because I think like they did a really good job of like, okay, we went to Wim's house, we got to see his family dynamic. We will eventually get to see Neil's in a second. We get Fern's here, we get her family dynamic. We never get KB's family dynamic ever, which I think is a shame. I understand there's four of them, so it's really hard. And we barely get Neil's. I mean, it's really like a quick, scene. It's more for comedy. It plays more for than it does actual like let's see his family dynamic. I really wish we would have gotten KB's because I think, especially when she's working on the bike itself, they could have introduced a thing where something medically happens to her. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we need to know that medical thing here, I feel like.
There's a tiny, tiny little moment where Fern's not really listening to KB and
Yeah.
KB's clearly taking the lead. But knowing how important the fact that Fern kind of doesn't treat KB differently from any other kid and sort of runs ahead, without really thinking about KB, that could have hit a little clearer. I
It's
think
the part where
this
yeah.
is the moment where it could have really hit super clear.
No, because I think what they should have done was when she was riding on the bike and then she goes through the buses and it almost clips the bus or whatever, and then the bike breaks down. She should have had something where she was kind of like maybe breathing really heavily or like what you know what I mean? Like something where like it was like that affected her and then Fern just doesn't notice right away that it affects her.
Yeah,
Like
that would have been a really good way to open it.
that would
Yeah,
have
it's
been, I
like
think, the best way to do
it
it.
takes Fern a minute to figure out that like KB's overstressed a processor or something.
Right. Yeah. Something simple. And then actually a really good character moment would be for KB to hide that from her so that she doesn't notice it ever. And then she just keeps going with it because her whole dynamic or their whole dynamic, it seems to be, is that Fern is in charge no matter what. KB just goes along with everything.
Correct. And we get
So,
that a little bit in this scene, but
yeah.
it's like with the acolyte again. Some of the things I said is like I see where it's here. And Ahsoka suffered from this really heavily. I see where it's here. You should have put more emphasis on it here.
And to be fair, the episodes are pretty complete. They are a tad short. Not that they feel short all the time, but you can see where, like, maybe an extra scene wouldn't have been a bad idea. And it wouldn't have drawn out the time too long. It would have been actually probably a really more balanced if you kept it in. Yeah, I really needed a KB scene, like, or a little bit more emphasis on KB in this episode for sure.
I agree. And I will say that Wim being accused of not growing up and like still holding on to this, even though he's older
Yeah.
than what would be societally expected, that he would be really into these stories and also staying up late reading Star Wars books. These are all continually dings on the personally attacks me personally counter.
Also, I kind of don't agree with Wendell in this scene where he's like, "Hey, you need to go to bed," and then he's like, "Hey, can you read me a bedtime story?" And then he's like, "No." I'm like, his mom is dead, clearly. Like, we don't know when she died, but
Yes.
like, clearly at a young age, he lost his mother. So that's going to, I'm not saying this is for everybody, but like, it could theoretically stunt you emotionally in some capacity to where you're
Yeah,
like,
if you endure a severe trauma
right.
as a child, it will affect how you develop, and I'm not a child psychologist,
Right.
so take this with a grain of salt,
Exactly. Yeah.
but being a parent for a child who has endured something like losing a parent that they love very much at a young age, that's something that's very difficult, and that's something that has to be handled very carefully. And Wendell, who's Wim's dad, part of the conflict of them in these early episodes is he expects Wim to be like all the other kids. He expects it's at again the same theme that we have with KB and Fern, where Fern expects KB to be kind of like all the other kids, except Fern's thing is Fern doesn't notice that KB is not like all the other kids. Wendell absolutely notices that Wim is hyper fixating on these sort of stories of heroism, and the fact he lost his mom at a young age maybe could inform his desire to protect people to such a degree that he does.
100%.
And Wendell's reaction is basically, dude, you got to grow up. Like, you've got to get over this. Like, not basically like, please ignore your trauma so that you can fit into the boxes that this society has for you. Like, it's really dark.
Damn.
It's
Yeah,
really
it really is.
fucking dark. Just how it's nice that Wim is personally attacking me personally all the time, but like
Mhm.
also part of why Wim is doing these things that are personally attacking me personally all the time is that it's coming from such a dark place. And it's really interesting just how they went all in on this show. Like, this show is so great because it's not afraid to do these things both overtly, like the overt danger that the kids are going to be in, but also like these very subtle things that are going on beneath the hood. Like, they put a lot of thought into them.
The next day, unfortunately, Wim wakes up late because he stayed up reading his bedtime stories too much, and he
Wow,
misses the
continues to
bus.
personally attack me personally, Counter.
But it's okay because he grabs his hover bike because he knows a shortcut, which he saw earlier on. Unfortunately, for him, he doesn't really know the shortcut because he's never taken it before, and he falls down a ravine. And while trying to get out, he finds a metal hatch in the ground. But before he can investigate, a security droid catches him, theoretically skipping school, and takes him to the proctor's office. Here, he's reading his little Jedi story pad when Fern shows up, and she's like, "Yo, what they got you for?" And he's like, "Oh, well, I missed my test." Fern teases him, "Well, what happens when you miss your test? You got to work in the mines underneath the town." Unfortunately, he knows that's not true. Fern's father shows up, or I'm sorry, Wim's father shows up and is pissed at him for missing the exam, but he explains that it's okay, you can take the exam tomorrow with a deduction, which means you got to get every single question right, otherwise you won't pass. Seems a little extreme. And then when Wendell leaves, Fern asks Wim what Jedi temple he's talking about, and he's like, "Oh, just kidding, I was lying." And then he heads home.
It took me a hot minute to figure out why Fern wasn't in trouble for missing assessment. And then I realized that Fern is not in the same class as
Yeah,
grade as
it
Wim.
took me a second to
It
figure that
took
out
me a
too.
minute to
Yeah,
figure out
she's
that
older.
Fern and KB are a couple of years older
Uh-huh.
than Wim and Neil.
Yeah, I
So
think I
Wim and Neil
realized
are in
that a
like
little
middle
later, but yeah.
school and Fern is in like high school.
Yeah, she's like in the first, like she's like a freshman in high school or something like that. Because she's definitely a little older. Also, she's just walking the halls. She's not like, no one's being like, "Oh, why are you at the proctor's office?" You know what I mean? Like, she didn't get sent
Yeah,
there.
she's
She
just
just
wandering
happens to
around.
be
She's
there.
clearly just cutting class. Like,
Yeah. Which
yeah.
it seems that though she can, because earlier in the other scene, her mom said, "Oh, you got back the top spot or whatever," meaning she can be successful and smart if she wanted to
She's
be.
clearly brilliant. Like,
Right.
she's clearly brilliant because slacking off to that degree and still being top of the class, no, she's a brilliant,
She's one of
brilliant
those people
student.
who doesn't need to actually go to class because she knows she is already smart enough, like in her abilities. She doesn't actually need to go. So she's cutting class because she's like, I'll just take the test tomorrow. Like, or whatever. Like
Yeah, and
she's like,
again,
I can figure it out. Yeah.
it harkens back. Failure for Undersecretary Farah does not mean the same thing as failure. Wendell
Right.
just wants his kid to show up and be decent. And for Undersecretary Farah, anything less than top of the class seems to not be worth it to her.
Right.
I do love, I need to point out, most of my notes for the back half of this episode are going to be, I love that the kids are written to act like kids. Like, obviously, Fern, this older kid, is going to terrorize this younger kid she just met with this story of working in the mines.
Yes.
Because Fern's kind of like a little rebel. Like, she's going to mess with this kid. And Wim is like, that's stupid. But he's also like, Wim is so young that he's going to run across something in the forest and immediately think it's a Jedi temple.
Oh,
Like,
100%. I
obviously,
love
he's
it.
going to think that. Now I'm going to get more positive about Wendell as the show progresses because he's going to learn his lesson. He's going to show that he's actually a really good dad. The scene where he walks out and he's like, "I'm going to drive you to class personally tomorrow so you don't miss assessment." And I'm sitting here going, "If you could do that,
Right.
if this is supposed to be the most important assessment of your kid's life, why did you not do that the first time?" And it's not bad writing. It's not a failure of the writing. It's a deliberate choice that he could have done this and didn't because he's that detached from his kid. He's
Right.
that
Because,
wrapped up in work that only once Wim majorly fucks this up
right. Then he
does
has to
Wendell make
reassess it.
some concessions to do the right thing for his kid.
Right. Because he said, I think earlier on, he was like, I'm going to be going in to work more. I'm going to be coming home late this week. So I really need you to kind of like step up and like, take care of yourself this week. And of course, Wim obviously doesn't listen at
Wim
all
doesn't
and
do
doesn't
that.
care because assessment's not something that's important to Wim, unlike everybody else, it seems. So it's funny. I don't love that the proctor is like, yeah, you can take the test again tomorrow with penalty that you have to get every single question right. But we already established in the first scene that he doesn't know all of the numbers of pi or whatever the fuck question he asked
Yep.
him. And like, like, so he's not going to get it right 100%. So is this not a lost cause? Like he's going to fail the test in
Say,
some
why not
capacity.
just fail it? Well, they're unnecessarily punishing him because that's what school
Yeah,
systems do is
that's true.
if you are a kid who thinks outside the box and also maybe not a good student, particularly in the post No Child Left Behind era, accommodations will not be made for you.
Right.
You are to do the standardized test. This is very much a show that's written for people who grew up too, kind of in the era of standardized testing, to with No Child Left Behind, and where your school funding was dependent on test scores. And so if you don't show up and take the test and do it right, then what use are you?
Right.
What's your point? You're not here to learn. You're not here to decide what the rest of your life is going to be. Your job is to show up and take the test and do good on the test, and we don't give a fuck what happens to you after. Good luck.
It's such an odd thing too. Like I'm just concerned for this society because like if this test is so important that everybody has to take this assessment test and if you take it like you're great and if you don't like you're done. Like I don't know what that means if you don't pass the test because we don't really find out what happens to you if you never pass the test. But what like would they not make sure every single student was there that day? They would check in. You know what I mean? Like if it's that super important to their society that you take this fucking test, they would make sure like they would have security droids come get you. Like you know what I mean? Like
Because it's a commentary on the No Child Left Behind standardized testing, how nobody gives a fuck if you're creative or inventive or you think outside the box. It's that commentary. It's one of those moments we kind of have to squint at the logistics a little bit because of the commentary it's making, and also really highlights how frustrating the society is and why Wim doesn't want to go back and take assessment.
in the next scene at Neil's home, his siblings are watching a circus hologram when their mother brings in some snacks. Wim arrives looking for Neil, and his little brother shows him that Neil's upstairs taking a bath. Wim interrupts him during this bath and convinces him to go into the garage to look for Neil's dad's tools, suggesting that they go check out this Jedi temple that Wim found. They head out into the forest and they accidentally roll down in the hill into the ravine, and the boys discover the buried hatch when a cybernetic voice startles them. Just turns out to be KB and Fern, and the girls call claimsies on the hatch. But Wim convinces the girls to let them dig for free in exchange for the first rights to the excavation.
I must correct you slightly because it is important to the rest of the show. The boys call claimsies first, then the girls call unclaimsies, and then the girls call claimsies
Oh my
again.
God. Okay, whatever.
It's these complex things. Look, these are very simple rules that everyone on this planet knows,
Of
Bradley.
course. And it's not
Okay.
that claimsies is not going to be important later, obviously. So
It's this show is a masterclass in setups and payoffs.
it really is.
Masterclass in setups and payoffs. I have a note later, and I'm just going to bring it up now, but So much is set up in this first episode that will pay off toward the end. And also, basically, all the mysteries that are introduced in the actual first two episodes are answered by the end of the show. We know who the skeletons are. We know what the ship is. We know how the ship got here. We know who the droid is. We know what's going on with the pirates at the beginning. We know why the droid was super into finance. We know why assessment exists. We know why Farah was so intent about Fern getting a good job like her. Like all of that makes sense by the end of the show.
I love that.
It's brilliant. And Claimsies, yeah, is one of those things that looks stupid. Like it looks like, haha, the kids are going to. This is a major plot point,
It's a major
actually.
plot point later
The
on, yes.
rules of Claimsies as established in this scene are a major plot point.
Which I didn't connect until I rewatched this episode. And I was like, holy shit, they said it right here. And then it's like, wow, that's such an important thing later on.
That's such an important
Anyway,
thing that will
love
happen
that.
later. We get a reference to the Star Wars holiday special that about had me on the floor. I had to pause the episode the first time I watched it. I
I
was laughing so
freaked
hard.
out when I saw this.
If you've never watched the Star Wars holiday special, there's a random scene in which like holograms of circus performers are playing. Now, this isn't that same hologram, but the costume designers studied the original costumes and recreated them.
Isn't that crazy?
So this is a little reference, and it's one of those blink and you miss it things to like how many Star Wars fans talk about the holiday special have ever sat down and watched it.
That's true. I don't know a lot of people who have truly like sat
Like
down,
sat
watched
down
it
and
all the way
watched and
through. Yeah.
internalized it sober enough to keep it in your
To
mind.
keep it in your
But
mind.
if you do, this was fucking hilarious.
Oh, so good.
Also, Wim like crawling up onto the top of the house and like tapping on the glass and Neil's like in the bath, also hilarious.
Every single scene with Neil is peak comedy, and I will not hear any other like anything else about it because every single scene, in his family too, by the way.
Oh yeah, his
His
family's fucking
siblings
hilarious.
are hilarious. They're so fucking cute. Two, by the way, I don't know, I have their names pulled up, but the slightly older one is his younger brother, and then the other two are twins. So
Okay.
they're like this cute little family dynamic of like four kids, two parents. Like it's just like a cute little like elephant family, and it's adorable.
It's adorable. Not the same species as Max Rebo and not the same species as Young Jedi Adventures. It is a third blue alien species that is just here.
Okay, this is a great time to bring that up. Why are they not just the same species from Young Jedi Adventures? Because I've never seen Young Jedi Adventures, but I pulled up the pictures of Androvan. I think that's what they're called. They're the same thing. It's not even
I
slightly
think they
different.
were developed. It was one of those situations where they were developed because Young Jedi Adventures is animated, and so it was done
Right.
so far back. They were kind of developed at the same. It's a hidden path situation
Yep.
to where two people came up with the same idea, and except in this case, just nobody talked to each other about what the idea was.
But then like instead of like because they never say in universe in the show what Neil's species is. So why did they not just be
It
like,
is a
okay, it's
Mickean, by
okay.
the way, in case
Mickey, that's
people
right.
were wondering. Mickean
Right.
is what Neil's species actually is.
My only thing is that like I mean I didn't watch the Young Jedi Adventures version, so I don't know if they have hair. Maybe that's the difference. Like, you know, this version of the species has hair and that one doesn't. I don't know. Fucking stupid or something like that, right? But I guess if you look at the dad has like more tusks or something, but then I
Yeah,
don't
the
know if
dad
they have
actually has
tusks
like
in the
grown tusks. Yeah.
do they have that in the Young Jedi Adventures, do you think? I've only seen like
I
female
don't think we ever
characters in
see an
there.
adult male.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe not. I mean, who knows?
I, I
But
I do want to point out that the writing of the kids throughout this entire scene, and this is pretty much my main note on this, the writing of the kids is so good for kids. Like
yeah.
kids are hard to write for as an adult. Like to get the cadence, to get the dialogue right, to make it sound like something kids would say. It's insane how good the writing of the kids, particularly in this early scene, is. Also, the boys being kind of dumb and tricked into this, like
Yes.
digging by the girls, is like it's note perfect. Like boys versus girls is such an old trope in
Old ass
kids
trip. Yeah.
media, and like it's here because these are kids.
Of course.
Like kids are gonna do this, and it's perfect. It's just note perfect.
No, I love when Fern's like, "Ugh, we're just not strong enough to dig out the thing." Like, and he's like, "Well, we're strong enough. Like, we can do it."
Yeah,
She's so
it's
funny.
it's great. Also, you got to remember Fern's a little older.
Right. She's just a little smarter.
She's just a little smarter than they
A little
are.
smarter than they are. Wim's father returns home to find his son is missing, not studying for his test like he was supposed to be. Back in the ravine, the boys are digging. It's dark outside. KB hooks up a cable from the hatch into a cybernetic augmentation that wraps around her head, causing the hatch to open up. The children go into the hatch when they hear someone coming, so they quickly jump in to hide. They realize it's Wim's dad calling him and call out Wim for getting in major trouble with his dad because he was supposed to be home studying, and Fern knows this. Wim finds a droid inside with a missing eye, mistaking it for a skeleton, and a rodent pops out, startling them, which causes the droid to pull the hatch lever down and close the doors, locking them inside.
Again, most of the mysteries that we see here are going to be answered by the end of the show, and I really like that.
For real.
That's my only note for this section, so we can
Oh,
move on.
okay, yeah. I mean, because I don't really have any. Oh, I did want to talk about KB a little bit though.
All right, let's talk about KB
I
a
want to
little
talk
bit.
about her cybernetic enhancements and things. So, is this the same thing as Lobot, or is this different?
Yes and no. This is different because we know this is different because Lobot's not all like Lobot anymore. Like this is kind of a big deal in the comics, but Lobot doesn't have a lot of the original personality.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, KBs are just like they're clearly like some sort of medical device aid, but KB is still KB.
Right,
Like all her personality is intact. I think visually it is supposed to be a Lobot thing. Like visually it
right.
is
It's supposed to be like a
supposed to look
reference in a sense.
it's supposed to look like Lobot, or even, you know what? I'm going to bring it up here. Some of the helmets in Knights of the Old Republic have a visor that kind of wraps around the back of the head.
Really? Okay.
So this is a thing in Star Wars. I think it all harkens back to Lobot and the original, like, but this is clearly in the same vein as those cybernetic implants. It's just Lobots are much
Right.
more intense than KBs are.
For those who don't know, Lobot is the guy from
Lobot is the
Return of the
Empire
Jedi.
Strikes Back.
Oh,
And
oh, Empire Strikes Back. That's right.
I
Uh,
highly recommend if you liked this show to go watch the original three Star Wars movies. I was going to say, unless you're Andy from First Steps, the Star Wars podcast, but they actually can't watch this show until they watch the original Star Wars movies.
oh, that's right. Because it's the New
It's
Republic.
a little after. Yeah. They're almost done with Rebels on First Steps. I think they're doing the Rebels finale as their next episode at time of recording this.
So, as the children are banging on the door, KB points out that the hatch won't open without power, so she leads them down another hatch to find power. But Wim is like, nah, I'm gonna go explore the Jedi Temple on my own. And KB strikes an engine like thing, causing the ship to kind of activate a little bit. Wim realizes that he's in a ship, not a temple, and he tries to tell Neel over his comm. Fern takes the comm instead and warns him not to touch anything, to which he does not listen because he sees a nice glowing green button and he's like, I'm gonna press this button. Presses the said button, starting up the ship. The children rush to escape only to find the ground is moving away from them. The ship rises up, rotates. Wim almost falls out, and as he's falling out, Wendell has been nearby, sees them in this ship. The ship kind of takes off, goes off into space, and the kids see stars for the first time. And just as they have this beautiful moment of seeing stars, they jump into hyperspace screaming.
I want to talk about the difference between Fern telling Wim to grow up and everyone else telling Wim to grow up. Because when everyone else tells Wim to grow up, they mean it superficially. They mean you need to act like an adult.
Right.
You need to focus on the adult things. They don't want him to they don't care about his thought process. They want him to behave in a different way. Fern, once they are trapped inside the ship and she's like, go up, you need to grow up. Like she means it as we are in an emergency situation.
Right. We're not playing
You
anymore.
need
Yeah.
you need to think seriously about
Right.
this. It's an unfortunate choice of wording on her part because everyone else telling Wim to grow up has been doing it in like a kind of derisive, you need to grow up sort of way. And when Fern does it, of course, he isn't going to listen in
Right.
this situation where he does actually need to be serious.
Yeah, because I think she points out, she's like, we need to hurry up before we don't have oxygen left.
Mhm.
Like, he's like, this is not a, we're exploring, having a good time. This is like a life or death. Like, we need to get out of
Yeah, like
here.
we're going to die if we don't
Yeah,
get out of
right.
here. Well, we also, I will say, the childish urge to push buttons that are randomly glowing is very real. And I understand this completely.
I understand it, but I'm also kind of like, you have no idea. That could literally blow up the entire thing. You don't know what that's doing, and he just does it anyway. Like,
Counterpoint, Bradley, button glowing mean push.
no, I hate it.
Yes. Uh, you do correctly point out they've never seen stars before. That'll be important later on, like in the finale, in the very
Right.
last few shots of the show. But I also do like how even this episode sort of ends where it began,
Yeah, I
with the
didn't
debris
realize
in
that until I
space.
watched this.
Mhm.
I was like, oh, that's so cool. And I do love how it goes from this very beautiful moment to like, oh, wow, what are those things? He's like, first of all, I love how he says those are planets. And then they're like, no, those are stars.
Those are stars. But
Uh,
also, like, none of them have ever seen
yeah,
stars
I can't blame
before.
him for that. Yeah, so it's actually kind of hilarious. And then they just jump into hyperspace, which is hilarious
And they jump into hyperspace screaming the whole way.
the whole way.
Who wrote and directed this episode, Bradley?
All right, so this episode was written and directed by John Watts with his writing partner Christopher Ford. Both of them are the executive producers as well of this show. So just to get that out of the way, those are our two big bads of the season, the writers and directors. There is another writer later on, and there's more directors, but they are the executive producers slash main writers of this show. So keep that in mind as we go through.
Yes, as we go through the
Right.
whole show.
So if we don't mention them randomly, they had a hand in it. Directed by John Watts, he is film director, producer, and screenwriter. He's best known for directing all three main Marvel Cinematic Universe Spider-Man films with Tom Holland. So Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home. That's the biggest thing you're probably going to know from him. Christopher Ford is a writer who collaborated with John on Spider-Man Homecoming, so he wrote that film, as well as he wrote the film Chaos Walking, which featured Tom Holland and Star Wars Connection Daisy Ridley. So if you haven't seen that movie, he wrote that. But yeah,
All righty. Well, Bradley, what are your final thoughts on this episode?
final thoughts on this episode are this is such a fun story. These cast of kids are I'm surprised how good of actors they are. They are all very great. Especially I'm gonna give a bigger shout out to Neil only because he's acting through a suit and somehow his performance comes through. Like, yes, the puppeteers do help with the puppeting of the mask and like the body, but like the emotion that the actor is bringing to Neil like makes us love him so much. And he's honestly my favorite character in the show. I there's just I mean, I also really love KB for other reasons, but he
We'll get
is
there.
yeah, and we don't get that till later obviously, but I as of now, Neil is currently my favorite. He's so adorable, he's so fun, he's so cute, he's such a perfect best friend character. He meets all the criteria and he's great. I love him so much and he's hot take the best blue elephant alien in Star Wars.
That is a hot take.
So all you Max Rebo stands, I'm sorry, but he doesn't have feet or he doesn't have arms. Okay, he only has feet. Relax.
My final thoughts on this episode, it's so rare to come across someone doing like a genre blend like this and perfectly understanding every single element of every single genre that they are playing with. This simultaneously feels perfectly like Star Wars and feels perfectly like a kid's adventure film, feels perfectly like everything Christopher Ford and John Watts have really broken down each of these genres to their core elements, understood what makes them work, and builds them back up. It is beautiful. We could have talked about this episode for multiple hours. I skipped so much
I was gonna say because we
that I could have talked about
yeah.
in this episode. It is fucking fantastic, and I love the show, and I can't wait to talk about it. Speaking of shows that we could talk about, you could find Bradley's work at his day job on Peacock and Bravo, wherever you get your reality TV. You can watch shows as Married to Medicine, The Circle on Netflix, Queen's Court, and Temptation Island, and some other ones I don't care about. So please watch those if you like reality TV so Bradley can keep being employed and pay for his part of paying for this show to exist. You can find me on the Star Wars TTRPG podcast For Light and Dice, on which I am a cast member. I also write gay thriller mystery novels myself. So if you also like mysteries, little darker stories than this, But if you want to read some of the stuff that I wrote, those are called Beach House Studios. They're available on Amazon Kindle and Kindle Unlimited for the moment. And there's a new one going to come out very, very soon that I'm excited about. All right, Bradley, that's it. So I guess you could run our socials. Thank you for listening to Gold Squadron Gaze. Did Charles fuck something up? Email us at goldsquadrongaze@gmail.com and let us know. You can follow us on BlueSky, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Gold Squadron Gaze. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Gold Squadron Gaze, where we post full episodes of this podcast. If you like the podcast, you can also rate us and review us on your favorite podcast app of choice. Please join us next week and every week for another episode of Gold Squadron Gaze. I gotta finish Elite. I gotta do that before I watch anything else. But I think the next thing, Andy, if you're listening to this, I think you might have got me to watch Black Sails. I don't want to make promises I can't keep, but I think just based on how cool the pirates were in this, I kind of want to watch Black Sails.